Are you looking to find more success in your professional life? Join me today for part one of our two-part discussion on 15 keys to success. Our first part today focuses more on the professional side. So let's dig in. Welcome to the Plan B CRNA podcast. I'm your host, Bobby Jones, and I'm so excited that you're here. The Plan B CRNA podcast is the only show made specifically for nurse anesthetists who are exploring options outside of their traditional career paths. This is the place to expand your mind and your goals as we uncover new ways to produce side income together. Join me for some honest, unscripted discussions with other CRNAs who are transforming their financial lives. This episode is brought to you by On-Call Capital. On-Call Capital is dedicated to educating CRNAs and other healthcare providers about investing outside of the traditional stock market. On-Call Capital also provides opportunities for you, yes, you, to create passive income and generational wealth while also lowering your taxable income through investments in the apartment and alternative investment spaces. If you haven't hit subscribe yet, make sure you do that right now so that you don't miss an episode. Thanks so much for joining me today. And now, on with the show. Welcome to another special episode of the Plan B CRNA podcast. I'm joined today by my favorite co-host, Matthew Newton. And today we thought we'd talk a little bit about, the different keys to success in life and the professional world and in business. And so today what we're going to do, we've got 15 points that we're going to go over. And these are things that you can really work on to, make a difference in your own life. So Matthew, hey, thanks, man, for joining me today.
Hey, it's great to be here. I appreciate you having me on. It's always a fun time.
Yeah, man. Our conversations always, are great. We've already been on for about 45 minutes before we even started recording and just talking about stuff. And so I'm looking forward to this episode. I think we're going to get into some fun topics here. Well, let's start off with the first thing to focus on, setting goals. So, the thing that a lot of people say that, a lot of people just throw that out there. Oh, you need to have a goal. And so goals are very different for everyone that's out there, you may set a goal for yourself that's like, hey, I want to be able to, dunk a basketball. Okay, that's great. I'm 5'6.5". That would, the goal for me would not be to dunk on a 10-foot goal. It might be, an 8-foot goal or something, a 9-foot goal. It's different for everybody what you have to shoot for. So, I'd love you, Matt, to kind of tell me what it is that helps you when you're setting goals. What helps you to be successful?
So to me, honestly, when it comes to goal setting, and I combine goal setting and motivations, if you listen, it's usually one of the first questions I ask any of the people I'm interviewing, because having clear motivations and clear, honest goals is the easiest way to make tough choices. In anything when it comes to business, life, and a career, there's a lot of difficult choices you have to make. So knowing why you're doing what you're doing and is it actually obtainable makes these choices so much easier. So like for me, once again, like we look at my career decisions. My prime motivator in life is spending time with my family. So when it comes to a hard decision of do I take X job because it'll pay bukus of money, or do I take, this other job, maybe pays a little less, but it offers you more time to spend with your family. It's really tempting to go for that large paycheck or go for that job that has so much travel involved. But at the same time, I ask myself, does it help me achieve my overall goal of spending more time with my family? And you can make arguments both ways. So which job do you take? Do you take the one that's going to pay you the best, where you're going to maybe be out of town for a couple weeks a year, miss time with your kids growing up for the next few years, but make more money and be able to provide in the future? You take a job that pays your bills right now and allows you more time to spend at home in the short term. So once I've identified these goals and made realistic ones, it's easy to make these big, tough decisions in life. The other thing I've also found helpful is if you really want to put it all out there, is once you've identified and you've written down these goals, tell somebody, talk to a couple people in your life, and ask them to hold you accountable. If I say, hey, I'm going to make X amount of money per year and I'm going to be able to have this many days off a month to spend with my kids or take them to school, and Bobby, I'm telling you that, please check in with me and hold me accountable. It really helps you achieve your goals.
Yeah. Well, and I think too, one of the things is also having a plan with that goal. You have to develop that plan to actually find yourself being able to realize those goals. So it's one thing to say, okay, well, I want to reach, $1 million in my retirement account by the age of 50. Okay. But how do you get there? Are you going to get there through stocks? Are you going to get there through, your 401k from work and all the matching stuff? Are you going to get there through real estate? What does that path look like for you? What are the specific targets that you can point to along the way that show you that you're actually staying on track? So,
And one of the other things is if Jocko Willink, I think in his book Extreme Ownership, talks about it's just so much further. So he just talks about like when you have to run and you don't know quite the distance that you're going to run because somebody else is telling you. If you just go, okay, I need to make it just to this next sign. And then when you get to that sign, I need to make it just to this next sign. I need to make it just one more mile.
mhm,
It's easier to take things in small bites than say, okay, I'm going to have to run 15 miles today. It's
sure.
easy to go, okay, I'm partitioning my goal and I'm setting smaller, achievable things that I can hit in the meantime.
Yeah.
That way you don't get disheartened and you don't lose steam.
Yeah. No, I love it. I love it. So moving on, number two, networking and managing relationships. And, networking is such a huge part of being in healthcare. And, I think it's about that support circle that you have. And, I still have so many great friendships from my career as a CRNA that have been good for the people that I'm with and good for me, and it's this mutually beneficial thing. But yeah, for the most part, trying to give of yourself a little bit here when you're talking about these networking opportunities. It's not just about what I can get from you. It's, hey, how can I help you out too?
Yeah, honestly, like networking and managing your relationships with your friends and your family and your coworkers is a huge leg up in the business world and in clinical. Having a large circle of people that you talk to, you have your point A connections, people that you talk to every day, and you have your point B connections, people that, maybe you talk to once a month or every quarter. Managing all these relationships, it really helps bring you into new challenges and open up, just new worlds for you that you might not have thought was possible. One of the other big things also with managing your relationships is you want to build everyone up around you. One of the things that I've personally noted, the difference between, doctors and nurses, the first day of doctor school, they tell the doctors, look left, look right, and shake hands with your fellow doctors. These are your partners in life. In a nursing school, they do the look left, look right. Two of the three of you won't be here today. And from the first get go of nursing school, they set up this competitive mentality where how can I be better than Bobby? Oh, you made $10, I made $11. Like how can
Yeah.
we always, and it sets this precedent, I feel like from the very beginning that a lot of us don't shake to where, nurses eat their own. How many times have we heard that? I know probably everyone listening to this
Mhm.
podcast has heard,
Yeah.
nurses eat their own.
Yeah.
I actually had an interesting interaction the other day on the forums on Facebook, which are always the most positive place. It was interesting. I had some CRNA reached out and he said, I'm having a really tough time in my career. I've been doing this for X number of years. I'm feeling burned out. I'm having these problems. Has anybody been in a similar situation and been burned out? What did you do to, rejuvenate your career? So I wrote a really thoughtful answer, pretty much along the lines of, hey, I have been there. I find, diversifying your work hours, about diversifying where you work, getting, realizing there's other options, taking more time. So I gave him my handful of burnout issues. And I was like, this is pretty good. Then I was like, hey, and if you have any issues, questions, reach out to me. I'm happy to talk to you about it because you don't ever want to see somebody be upset or, ruin their career or life for
Mhm.
that matter.
Mhm.
And I was pretty happy with that. And then immediately it was ding, ding, ding. Five other CRNAs right behind me. Suck it up, Buttercup. You'd better do a better. This isn't the career for you. Then the next person was, I would just quit if I were you. You clearly weren't cut out to be a CRNA. And it was like, guys, like,
Gosh.
this negativity is just toxic. And
Mhm.
I hate because I'm like, why are we so competitive? Like anybody that's crying for help, I feel like you should at least listen, at least lend a sympathetic ear. Like let's
Mhm.
raise each other up on a platform like a lot of physicians do, and not eat our own like nurses do. Like let's evolve from that mentality, and we can truly help each other out.
Yeah, no, I agree with you there. And it was something I noticed a lot more when I was in school versus once I got out. It did seem like there was a little bit less competition once I got out, into the real world of my career. But definitely when you're in school, there's that pressure. But, it's something that you still notice it in some of the networking meetups and things like that. And people kind of, like you said, oh, well, yeah, I make this much here. And oh, I make this much here. Or, I wouldn't settle for anything less than this amount. And because you are settling for that, you're lesser than. And that stuff that's online, there's still that sense of anonymity, even though your name may be there, even though people may know you, and there's still that sense of anonymity that you're not going to be held accountable for that. And I think that brings us very nicely into our third point: conducting yourself professionally in all situations. And that's tough with today's social media environment. Is like, okay, well, how do you balance the professionalism that you should show with your own personality and your own life and lifestyle? I've seen a couple of CRNAs now that have been punished for things that they did online. And whether that's losing their position, being, kind of blackballed from the community, things like that, that are really challenging. And it always catches people off guard when something like that happens.
It's interesting. Like, if you look at my Facebook, I hate to say it's sanitized, but you would have no idea what political leaning I have or anything like that. And that's not by accident. Like, and it's funny because, like, I'll talk to you all day about politics, but like, really, you do. I hate to say, you kind of have to protect yourself because people do look at that kind of stuff nowadays.
Mhm.
And when engaged in conversation, I absolutely will tell you everything I believe and what I think in a nice and respectful way. But with as polarized as the world has kind of become, it's hard to put all that out there because I see a lot of CRNAs put a lot of stuff online where I'm like, ooh, that I may find that funny or may not, but I probably wouldn't put that on my Facebook or my LinkedIn profile. And the other interesting thing is, we talk about professionalism. You know, it's learning how to talk to people. Like, you go into these, like, you look at the corporate world or you look at wherever it is, and they have business speak where, oh, my syntax is really heavy and I have a plethora of this. But if you listen to the business speak that they have, it's very non-confrontational. It's a really interesting way of speaking. And when you think, like, this sounds ridiculous on some of it, but then when you realize, like, the actual mechanic behind it and why people talk the way they do, you're like, I guess that makes a lot of sense. Because I cannot tell you how many times I get emails from CRNAs, for instance, that are just very confrontational, very direct. And I like direct. I just like direct in a respectful way. I'm one of those don't beat around the bush kind of people. Just tell me, like, if
Mhm.
I'm doing a terrible job, just tell me. Be like, Matt, this project you completely failed on. Here's what I think you need to do better. Here's plan A, B, and C of what we're going to do. Let's meet back up in 3 months. I'd much rather be direct like that. But to come out and, or use derogatory words or be like, Matt, you really suck. Like, and it's interesting because I talk to a lot of CRNAs and a lot of business professionals, and I'm like, guys, like, maybe we should button up the way we talk to each other just a little bit. And don't get me wrong, like, I have a great sense of humor. Nothing really offends me. I'm like, but there's 15 other people on this call. Like, I would, like, let's be professional with it. Or, the other thing is when we disagree on something, like, go ahead and say, I'm not meeting your pay demands, or, you don't like the way I run something and you want to step away. You do it respectfully and you say, hey, you know what? Thank you so much for this opportunity. This is something I say all the time to people. Thank you so much for the opportunity. It's not right for me and where I am currently in my life or what I need at the moment. I go, but with your permission, I'm going to circle back to you in 3 to 6 months. Maybe we can readdress this and see if anything has changed on either end. I really appreciate the opportunity.
Mhm.
Like, that is a great way of saying, nah.
Yeah, exactly.
It is, and I'm like, I will walk away from that conversation going, man, you're a good guy. Like, I appreciate that. And that's a good way to let me down. No
Mhm.
one's feelings have gotten hurt and the door is open. Plus, you set expectations. You will hear from me in 3 months. You will hear from me in 6 months.
Mhm.
So having that kind of conversation and doing it in a nice, respectful way is a good way. And then the other thing for professionality, kind of like back to our previous point, is when you talk to people online and all that, we have a lot of keyboard warriors out there. Don't do that.
Yeah, yeah.
Be
Well, and
respectful,
that's the thing. People don't realize how intimate of a community the anesthesia community is. And you think, oh, there's 55,000 people. That's a lot of people, or 57,000 now, whatever it's at. That is a lot of people. But people talk, people communicate. Other people network with others. And so when you start acting in such a way that people don't want to have you in their ORs, they don't want to hire you if you're, treating people in such a way, because let's face it, we all know people who tend to be more confrontational when they're in the operating room or when they're handling a case. And
Mhm.
they're very controlling and they have their way. And we know those CRNAs. We worked with them. We've, precepted with them or learned from them. And it matters. And so this leads into our next one, number 4, which is attitude. It makes such a big difference to have that. It doesn't have to be sugary sweet, positive, like sunshine and rainbows. But I mean, it goes hand in hand with that professionalism, that courtesy that you show to other people. It's a respect thing for me, respecting the other people who are there, trusting them to do their jobs and trusting that they're not trying to undermine you, which, yes, I know that's not always the case. There are little nitpicky things that go on in every workplace, and sorting that out is, that takes nuance. But there is always a certain amount of drama that's just always going to be there. But trying to rise above that, not be a part of that, not feed into it. Having that attitude that basically tells other people, hey, I'm not gonna deal with that. That's not my problem. Like you take your BS somewhere else. I think that matters.
Yeah, attitude is definitely a very important thing. I remember talking to one CRNA who always just kind of had the bad end of the stick, and he was like, "Man, I can never catch a break. I'm always getting in trouble for this and that." And I'm like you want my honest opinion? I'm like, it's because you have a poor attitude. I'm like, you have this I can't because, which seems to be the motto nowadays. I can't because of X.
Mhm.
How about I can? Like find a way to make it work. I'm like, but when you walk into the OR, I'm like, you grumble. And you grumble about the case, and you grumble about the surgeon, and you grumble about the setup and not having enough time, and you grumble about the weather. Nothing positive ever comes out of your mouth. I'm like, and I love you to death. I was like, but one of the big differences is I'm like, you can be the best CRNA in the world, and everybody in the room thinks you have a poor attitude and they don't like you. The moment something goes wrong, they're going to be like, "Yep, so and so is just terrible," blah, 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 because you have a bad attitude. I go, whereas I could be just a mediocre to bad CRNA and have a great attitude and everyone loves me. And the moment something bad happens, well, that's just, Matt had a tough day. Tomorrow will be better. And your
Mhm.
attitude really does steer everyone's perception of you. And, like I talk about this whole I can't because motto, like nowadays it's easy to be a victim. And
Mhm.
you fall into that mindset to where I'm not going to succeed because. And like to me, that's counterintuitive. Whether you are a victim or not, whether there is a situation pressing on you or not, like I challenge you to try to find a way to rise above it. Like I've had numerous hurdles in my life that I've said, okay, you know, I'm going to succeed in spite of this, or because of this, I'm going to succeed. I mean, I had a really real conversation. I remember when I was in nursing school, and it was probably not the nicest teacher, pulled me into her office and said, "Matt, what do you want to do when you get out of nursing school? Are you gonna go be a floor nurse?" And I said, "I'm gonna go to CRNA school." And she looked at me straight in the eyes and said, "You're not smart enough." And I'm like, "Oh, there it is. Like, you
Wow.
just gave all the motivation I need in life." And she was dead serious. "You're not smart enough to be a CRNA." And I was like, "Okay, I'm now going to be a CRNA. You
Yeah.
just cemented my future. Hopefully, hopefully this was a lesson you were trying to do and encourage me." I don't think it was, but you know what? You certainly did.
Yeah, a little reverse
uh,
psychology in there.
it worked well, but really though, attitude is such a big thing, and it's interesting, like kind of in the like you want to if you want to combine, your attitude and being professional. An interesting thing enough, like you mentioned it a minute earlier, where you're talking about how small the anesthesia world is. When I first started, I wasn't a great CRNA. I had a really poor attitude. I made all of the first year CRNA mistakes. I had an ego, I knew everything, and I remember when I started my own company, I tried to get credentialed at a hospital, and my credentials got rejected. And I'm like, "What? Like, what? This is weird. Oh, I'm the owner. My credentials don't get rejected." And I turned them back in, and they didn't credential me again. And I'm like, "What is going on?" So I started doing a little digging, and I found out that one of the people in the hospital who was responsible for credentialing was had a very close relationship with one of the nurses that I had worked with the previous year, who I had just been awful to. As a
Mhm.
egotistical, crappy CRNA, like I said, I was also burned out and there's a lot that was going on, excuses, excuses. I made
Mhm.
mistakes. And I remember I barked at this nurse one day, not rightfully so, and I shouldn't have. And because of that, the person that she was associated with hated me. And I was like,
Mhm.
"Oh, okay, well." So I went to that person. I said, "Hey, I just want to let you know I'm a different person now. I've made mistakes. I did this, and I'm very sorry for it."
Mhm.
Hat in hand, I'm like, "I realize that doesn't make it better." I'm like, "But if you give me the chance to be credentialed at your facility, I guarantee I will prove you wrong, and
Yeah.
I will show you that I'm a different person." And my credentials went through the next time, and it was probably one of the best, most humbling career choices I made.
Yeah. No, that's cool. That's cool, man. I love that story because it's kind of a I'm trying to think of how to describe it. It's just self-realization. I love that subject because I've I've gone through a lot of that in the last few years with the career change that I've had and things going on, personally and professionally, all that kind of stuff. It's you start to learn more about the things that it takes to be successful and you realize that, maybe you're not as big as you think you are sometimes, So but, go
I
ahead.
got
Go ahead.
one more thing on being professional and having a good attitude. I read an interesting book. It's called Give and Take.
Mhm,
I want to say it's by Adam Grant. If you guys haven't read that one, it's definitely a very interesting one. And it talks about different types of people. One is a taker, one is a giver, and one's a matcher. Matchers, they do only things to have it reciprocated.
mhm,
Takers only find ways to make situations work for themselves, and they always take. Givers give unconditionally.
mhm,
And throughout the book, he talks about people that succeed in life typically are special kinds of givers. It's giving with, yourself is still in mind. So you give unconditionally, but you give unconditionally to certain points. So it's educated giving, if that makes
mhm,
sense.
mhm,
And when it comes to attitude, I've found that giving always helps. Like even like being on the podcast, I'm not receiving anything for this, but I want to give, I want to help.
mhm,
I like to help build other people up and do other things. Same for the workplace. Can I give you a lunch break? Can I give you hey, there was a long break between my cases. Would you like to take 15 minutes to go
mhm,
get some coffee? Just giving it changes the way people look at you. It changes the way people do things. And like in certain scenarios, you get kind of toxic cultures in the workplace, and trying to go in there and change that toxic culture to where everyone's looking out for themselves and saying, "Oh, you know what? Matt does always give me a break. Maybe I should give John a break.
mhm.
Maybe I should pay it forward a little bit." So, being a giver really does benefit you in the long run.
Yeah. No, I also noticed that that might be your way of saying that you're being underpaid by me for these appearances. I don't know. But no,
The
I
royalties, they roll in soon, right?
yeah, yeah, they'll start coming. Just keep checking your bank account. It's fine.
Yeah.
It's gonna show up. But no, man, I love that idea of the, givers, takers, and matchers because that leads us perfectly into our next point, which is negotiating professionally. And a lot of people just don't know how to do this. They don't have any idea of how to actually negotiate their contracts or their jobs when they're first getting there. Sometimes you're in a situation where you have a certain amount of power and you can come in and you could actually just come in and start demanding things. The problem that I've seen is that there are a lot of situations where it's this pendulum or a bell curve, I should say. You've got basically the opposite of the bell curve where, you got people on one side or the other. Either you got these people who are demanding, 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 or you've got these people who don't ask for anything. And then they end up, being burned out and not being happy with their job because they walked into a situation that they weren't actually going to be happy in. And, or these people who are just demanding, 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 and then they get rejected for positions or whatever that they may have had a chance at, or they're just turning away positions that actually would have been a great career fit for them, in lieu of just well, I have to have every single demand that I have met. So what are some of your thoughts on this, Matt?
Like negotiating professionally is definitely an art. Once again, I'm just gonna plug 1,000 books on this show today. Never Split the Difference by Chris Voss has literally made me hundreds of thousands of dollars, and I 100% mean this. I read this book a long time ago. I probably before any major negotiation, I've no doubt I've reread this book. I probably read this book 5 times already, and he talks about a lot of little points about how do you get the
Mhm.
best deal and make everybody feel like they won. And it's all by negotiating professionally.
Mhm.
So one of the things I always say when you start a negotiation, understand your worth, not your ego, but
Mhm.
understand your worth. So like if you want to go in to negotiate as a CRNA for pay, well, I asked them for $300 an hour. This is BS. Why am I not getting $300 an hour? Well, did you understand the situation? Look at the clinic you're trying to go to. They only do 8 patients a day. If you want to say a bad payer mix, which also understand the billing component, at least a little bit, or have a ballpark idea.
Mhm.
You have a bad payer mix of patients. You're only doing a small number of patients, 8 patients a day, and you're maybe like people just assume anesthesia company, lots of money, give it to me. The anesthesia company and the billing company, and don't get me wrong, there is other fees, there's other things that people can make money on all that, but like the basic of it, most people only like most billing, you're only typically getting between 200 and 275 an hour for a payer mix.
Mhm.
So when you come in and you ask for 250 or $300 an hour and they say no, you're like, well, they're just being greedy. Maybe they are, maybe they're not, because it
Mhm.
doesn't make sense to open a whole room, pay you an 8 hour minimum where your pay for the day is going to be $1,500, and we're only going to be reimbursed 900 or 1,000. But this is just something I've noticed, because I've done my own building for a long time, and this has been a battle I've personally had. So knowing what you're actually worth, knowing what you're generating is helpful. And then also, like, you go into a room and you're doing these X number of cases, and it's got so many time units associated, and you understand the math. Oh wow, man, they're going to be billing about 4 grand for this one case. Well, then that $1,500 really does make a lot of sense, and you have a leg to
Mhm.
stand on. You can go from there. The other thing is not everybody, like when you make an offer. One of the things that he talks about in his book is don't be the first to throw numbers out there, which is always really good because
Mhm.
you never know what they have in mind because they certainly do have something in mind, and you do too. So if I can, I try to delay that. I'm giving you a number. What is this position worth? You ask all those probing questions to get them to give you
Mhm.
a number because maybe it's more than you thought. The other thing is that I find pretty interesting is there's more to ask for than just money. People look at, well, I want X dollars per hour. Well, what other things can come into an actual package
Mhm.
that's worth it? Like, is it more vacation time? Is it money? Is it hours? Is it stock for a publicly traded company? Like, is it a better 401k? What is it? I mean, like,
Yeah.
are they going to pay off like
Payment
student
for
loans?
education, things like that. Yeah.
There's other things than money, and people look at money as the grand thing. But and that's also really good to go back to our first point is where are your goals?
Mhm.
Because if
Mhm.
your goals aren't aligning with the things that you're asking for, like I said, it makes these decisions easy. But the biggest thing is a lot of times you will reach an impasse with people, and agreeing to disagree is fine. And I go back to what I said earlier: is thank you so much for this opportunity. It's not right for me at the moment. This is more of what I'm looking for. I realize that we're not at that right now. Please keep my number. I'll circle back in a couple months. I remember at one of my previous jobs when I worked for a large hospital, they made me a really insulting offer. And I told them, hey, look, I gave them my spiel. And then I said, hey, but you know what? My rate's 250 an hour. I know
Mhm.
that's way more than you want to pay. But if you ever need me for anything, I'm like, please call me and I will be here for that. I'm like, and I'm not, I go, that's just the price to get me to leave my vacation or leave my family time. That's what it costs to bring me in. I go, and that's all I go, and it's all due respect. And they were like, we're not going to call you. And they absolutely called me all the time, and that was great, and it worked out well. But nobody got their feelings hurt. Nobody got
Yeah.
upset. You put your offer out there nicely and they'll come to you eventually or they won't. And then, you're above market.
Mhm. Mhm. But going back to the other side of it, if you go in and you just don't ask for anything, you just take whatever they're going to give you. I mean, you're already starting at a certain level, and it's probably not the highest that they will go. Now, sometimes it is, but I mean, I've been in a couple of different jobs over my career, and you're already starting at this base. So if you want to, if you actually do want more money or you want more vacation time, all you have to do is ask. You can ask to see if that's a possibility. Hey, you know what? You guys are offering 4 weeks of vacation time to me. Can we make it 6? Can we get to that point where it's 6 weeks for me? What does that look like? If their standing offer is $150 an hour and you were really shooting for 200, okay, then you come back and you're like, hey, I was really hoping for 200. Well, we can't do that, but we can get you to 180. That's not a bad place to be. And you have that ability to ask for things because some of these jobs, like once you start at that level, like that's where you're going to be at. You may get some pay bumps, but that may just be where you're going to be. And so, making sure that you start off at that point that's most comfortable for you and your needs, I think is an important part of when you want a job and you want to walk in there and feel confident that you're being respected.
Well, and the other thing is interesting when you talk about like how do you get to that, if you really wanted that 200, you set anchors.
Mhm.
Like if you kind of know where they're going to go and if you really want 200 an hour and you've done the math and you realize that they can't afford to pay that, well, hey, what, set them an extreme anchor. Be like, hey, I'm, you know, realistically for this point of what I'm doing, a salary between 200 and 250 really fits what I'm looking for, yada, yada,
Mhm.
yada. If we can't do that, that's great. And they're not going to come back at 250, but they'll go, well, maybe 200.
Mhm.
You won't get that extreme anchor on the top, but you'll definitely be closer at least to that one
Yeah.
on the bottom. So if originally they were wanting to do 150, you might actually end up at 200 because they know
Yeah.
150 is out of the question and you
Yeah.
did it in a respectful way. It's the same thing I do when I buy houses. I'll when I love to submit an assaultingly polite offer. I love that. So like what I'll do is oh, I know, hey, I know I'm coming in, $70,000 less than asking, but this is where your realtor comes in. I'm planning on using it for rental. In this current market, it's getting X amount with the way
Mhm.
the loans look. This is what it is. And I need this price at $70,000 or maybe some creative financing on your end
Mhm.
to make these numbers work. That way they're not going to get angry and they go, oh, it's a logical decision. It's just not an arbitrary number.
Mhm. No, and I get that because I've just gone through this process with my mom, who's buying a condo for my aunt to live in and rent and stuff. So it's an investment for my mom. It's a source of stability for my aunt, who's starting to get priced out of living in our market. And so, the realtor, the price of the property was at 165, and they had recently come down in price too. The realtor's telling us, okay, well, this is a property that, the size of the condo, normally it goes for 180 to 190. So this is a pretty good deal. And so I'd make a starting offer around 62, yeah, or 162. And, we were kind of talking about it. And then, I've always had in my head that, a lot of these places, a lot of these areas, I mean, it depends on the market, obviously. Some markets have 30 different offers coming in. But if you don't have a ton of offers coming in, you don't have a lot of competition. And so, certain markets, hey, you're not going to be expected to pay 100% of asking price. And to me, that 162 number was awfully close to that asking price. So we actually talked my mom down from that offer and said, well, how about we go with 157? Let's just start at 157. That's about 95% of asking price. The sellers accepted it with no negotiation whatsoever. So you don't get what you don't ask for. You're already starting at no. And so it doesn't hurt to ask. You might get more than you think you were going to get anyway, because we were planning to settle around 160, 161, something like that. Now we don't have to, and so that's where I think just having that general idea of, hey, I want to ask for this. It may be pie in the sky, but maybe not, because sometimes if you don't have a great feel for things, you may not, you may get more than you think you'll get. But moving on. Now, our next one, I think, is a big topic. And you kind of touched on this earlier. Taking responsibility, admitting when you're at fault. Sometimes people aren't always great at that. I mean, I've had trouble with that in my past, and I still do. I mean, it is, trying to take responsibility for your actions, having that self-awareness to be able to figure out when, hey, I got to own up to something. I think that's an important thing because a lot of us, you know, we can have a tendency in today's day and age to kind of play the victim.
Yeah, if you have problems taking responsibility, just get married. You'll always be wrong. But but yeah, honestly, that's right. The taking responsibility is a big key factor whenever you're a leader in any team. If that team is failing, it is ultimately your fault.
Hmm.
One way or the other, even if it is not directly you, it is still your fault because you
Hmm.
are responsible for that team.
Hmm.
It is your job to make cuts, to offer advice and make improvements and do all these things. So being able to take responsibility for all situations, whether personal, professional, or in teamwork, it's very, very important. And the other thing is when you're working with any group of people, it's easy to say, "Oh man, this was out of my hands," yada yada yada. Even if it's not your fault, I take responsibility for things that aren't my fault all the time. Especially like for one, it's a great way to end an argument. If me and you are arguing, Bobby, about something, and I know you're wrong, and you know you're wrong too. If I go, you know what, Bobby, you're like it's my fault. This is what happened. Blah blah blah. Blah. You know I'm full of it.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah,
I've taken responsibility, and you can't argue. You can't like the argument's completely over. You can't argue
yeah.
with the fact that I've stopped it. Like just like once again, you know you're wrong. So this stops the argument right there. Two, the other thing is it makes you look like the bigger person. If you're working within a group and you just say, hey, you know what? Here's the plan. This is what happened, and once again, I'm going to execute it by doing A, B, and C. Now you have just grabbed the situation by the horns, and you are controlling it. So if you're wanting that, that raise, you're wanting that boost to upper management, and you walk into somewhere and you look at people look at admitting fault as a weakness.
Mm.
And to me, I look at it as a strength. Because if I say, hey guys, this is what I did wrong. This is what I'm going to do to fix it. It shows leadership. It shows initiative. It shows that you're trying to improve your team. One of the biggest things I did when I was in my younger age is I was negotiating a deal with a group, and the group I laid out the plan of how we're going to go live and how this is going to happen, and the group missed their mark.
Hmm.
And I got upset, but I was like, okay, guys, well, here, this is what we're going to do to fix it, blah, blah, blah. We went from there. A couple more months passed, and the group missed their mark. And the same thing happened two or three more times, and it was so frustrating. And I was like, at my wits' end because I mean, I invested a lot of time and a lot of money into this, and and then I started talking to the person about, okay, well, here's what we're going to do to make it work again. And the leader of that group came to me and said, "Well, here's what you've done wrong." And they just totally didn't take responsibility for anything that happened on their end, and they blamed it on me. And I lost my temper because we all do that. And I was like, "This is BS. This is what you did." Da 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 da. And I just came at him, which was very unprofessional. Once again, I've changed a lot in my time. This is years and years and years ago. And I was like, and I pretty much just slammed the phone down and hung up, which I don't do.
Hmm.
Um,
Hmm.
and I just remember went back, I was thinking about some of the books I read, and I went, "Man, oh." So I called up that person immediately, and I said, "I just wanna let you know I am wrong. I was frustrated. I handled this situation completely improperly. It was unprofessional." I go, "And I understand you don't wanna do business with me anymore. Here is a list of my competitors, of people that you can use, that they are a little more pricey, and I do not feel that you'll get the same quality as you would with us. But I do not want to leave you high and dry, and I want to make sure that your needs are taken care of. I am very sorry for how I conducted myself." And they appreciated that. And then the following day, they called me up, and we actually got everything up and running like we should have, because I took responsibility for my poor reaction. And it was once again very humbling.
Hmm.
But once again, it got a great big deal done, which I wouldn't have had if I had just left that phone slammed down.
Yeah, yeah, man. Well, and that's, again, that takes us beautifully, I think, into one of our next points. Number 7, leading by example. Because it's not easy, and I think a lot of the people that are listening to this show, they are leaders themselves, whether they want to believe it or not. When you walk into that room and you're in charge of the whole of a person, I think that's a leadership position to me. I've always thought of us as being leaders in the operating room and even outside of it as well. And so, you know, yeah, you're going to be in situations at work where somebody's playing favorites or somebody's finding a way to skip out early on a regular basis. Oh, I've always, there's somebody always has this problem or whatever. But I mean, the way you create an environment that you want to be in is by being the embodiment of that environment. So I always found myself, I always compare myself to being a duck, like I'm cool and calm on the surface, but my feet are just kicking like crazy. Okay. And I always felt like I needed to act like I've been there before, like that's, yes, we're going to encounter situations in the operating room where we need help, where, it's outside of our expertise and we need some assistance or we need some guidance. Everybody's run into those situations. But for the most part, what we do is highly manageable by us and by our individual training. We all have our strengths and weaknesses individually, but we wouldn't pass our boards if we couldn't do what we need to do. So I think for me, it was always about projecting this calmness because I felt like if I could project calmness, then that helps to bring that room down a bit to where I need it to be in order to be the best version of myself as a provider. I'm not great in some frenzied, crazy environment. That does not help me at all in doing my job. And so that was always my thought is like, hey, if I'm sitting in my chair and it looks like I'm not doing anything, that's the image I want you. I want to make this job look easy, you know, because I'm on top of everything that I need to be on top of. Now, some cases, you just aren't going to be able to do that. And I know that. But that was always my thing. Everybody knows the CRNA that's always got to be fidgeting, always got to be messing, and is always, and it creates a more frenzied environment. Now, perhaps some people need that to feel like they're on top of things, and everybody's different. But that for me was the way that I led by example when I was in the operating room was, hey, yeah, sure. What do you need? Yeah, I'm willing to help. I want to, how do we need to position this patient better so you get access and let's figure this out together. We're all a team, but really kind of making sure that the team knew that I was there for my part and that I wasn't going to fall down on the job. I think that's an important part of it. They knew they could count on me and I knew that I could count on them in return. I showed that respect that I wanted to be shown.
Yeah, I think that sums it up actually perfectly too. I always tell people lead by example. You need to be the colleague or the boss that you would want to work with.
Mhm.
It's really, as in the medical profession or in any profession, when you're given a little bit of power to be a team leader or a manager, a boss of any sort, sometimes it goes to your head. Sometimes you want to sit on that iron throne, tenting your fingers in the corporate office and looking down at the peons. And we're human. We have egos. It happens. The key is to have that self-realization where you go, well, I shouldn't do this. I really do need to treat everybody the same. I need to treat myself the same. One of my mottos has been like, pass the mop. Nothing is above me.
Mhm.
I give anesthesia with the best of them. I flip a room. I wipe down my cables. I do all this stuff, not just what the high and mighty anesthesia provider does of let me mix these drugs. Let me, I can do
Yeah.
anything. I mean, of course, you do it reasonably where people aren't taking advantage of you. But like I've been in centers before where CRNAs or AAs or anesthesiologists, I don't push beds.
Mhm.
Get the tech, and it's like,
Yeah.
oh come on, like you're pushing a bed 20 feet, like you can do it. Like,
Yeah.
some of them have reasons, I guess, but like I don't do this. I've heard I don't do this a lot. And it's like, guys, like you need that I can attitude to where you
Mhm.
want to, like I said, you want to be the person that you want to work with. The other thing is, treat everybody fairly. Like, so I used to work with a provider who every single day he would come into my room every day and it would be X excuse, Matt, hey, I need to be in the early room today. I have my son is competing in an underwater basket weaving competition and I got to be there. And I'd be like, "Oh, I'm so sorry. Oh, that sounds like fun. Go have fun. I get it. You need to be there." And then the next day, "Hey, I have to be in the early room today. I'm judging this paper mache drawing contest. Some BS reason after another." And it was always,
Mhm.
and after about a month, because I gave him grace, because you never know, maybe he's in a bad situation or whatever. I was like, "Hey, I just want to let you know that you're friends with everybody at the center on Facebook, and you log all your exercise routines." I go, "So when you leave for your paper mache competition, everybody can see you just went and biked a marathon and ran 12 miles.
Mm.
Like everybody knows. So you're making these excuses." You go, "It just looks bad." I'm like,
Yeah.
how about we, maybe let's rotate who gets out early, And it looks like I gave him the benefit of the doubt just to make
Mhm.
sure that it wasn't like a thing going on. And he's like,
Yeah.
"Oh," and I'm like, "It's okay. No, nobody's mad." I'm like, "But just let's all just be a little equal when it comes to it, because it's nice to get out early sometimes."
It is, and you do see those times where like, hey, yeah, there's this person, they get out early a lot, and and I've always thought it was funny because you have, when I first started in nursing, I was married, but I didn't have any kids, and you would always have the people with kids always asking, and it's like, as somebody who didn't have kids, it's like, well, are my needs not valuable? Why does this person always get Christmas off and Thanksgiving? And I get it. They have a family. I have a family too. Like, just because I don't have kids doesn't mean I don't have a family. Even if I were single, doesn't mean I don't have a family and I don't have needs that I need to have taken care of.
One of the things I do, which is really good. So like I'm responsible for 18 states. I manage. I do a lot of my actual clinical work in Georgia. And, I work with the schedulers very closely. And most of my thing is I'm like, "Hey, if I can be close to home, excellent. But, on certain days, if you need to send me wherever, that's fine." And sometimes they'll send me clear south of Atlanta. Well, people that don't live in Georgia, it takes 30 minutes to go a mile in Atlanta sometimes.
Mhm.
That's on a good day. So I'll drive an hour to a clinical site to help out, knowing full well if I get done past 2 o'clock, it's going to be a 2.5 to 3 hour drive home, which
Yeah.
is tough. Also, a good time to listen to podcasts like this, guys. If you have a nice long commute, the Plan B podcast. Good excuse. But so what I'll do in these situations is when I go down to these clinics, I'll say, "Hey guys, I just want to let you know I live in Woodstock, Georgia. It's about 2.5 hours to 3 hours to get home. I don't need to leave early. I don't have anything to do after this, but I would love to not get stuck in traffic. So if I could be the early one out, that's great. If anybody else has anything else that they have to do, I'm fine being the last one out and closing up today.
Mhm.
It doesn't matter." But no hard feelings either way. And probably 7 out of 10 times, they're like, "Get out of here." And hell,
Mhm.
Matt, we'll finish the last case in your room. So you're not going to get, like, we'll let you get done before 2. So it's only going to take you an hour and a half to get home instead of 3 hours,
Mhm.
which is excellent. That is who I want to work with. What great CRNAs. And then
Mhm.
one of the other things I do is, even when I'm at these sites and I'm done and I am the first one out, every single time, without doubt, I will pop my head into every single CRNA's room and I'll say, "Hey, how's your room looking? Is it restocked? How many more cases do you got? Can we flip one into my room? And then, do you need to leave early? Do you have anything that's going on after work today? Blah, blah, blah." I always check, because that's what I would want them to do for me, no matter where I'm at. And it's
Yeah.
being a good colleague and leading by
Yeah.
example.
No, I love it. I love it, man. All right, let's recap. Our first 7 keys to success in life, your profession, and business are: number 1, goal setting; number 2, networking and relationships; number 3, conduct yourself professionally in all situations; number 4, attitude; number 5, negotiate professionally; number 6, take responsibility; and number 7, lead by example. And that's going to do it for today's show. If you enjoyed this conversation, make sure you join us next week for the conclusion to our 2-part discussion on keys to success in life, your profession, and in business. This is Bobby Jones signing off. Until next time, stay safe and take care of each other out there. Thank you so much for joining me for another episode of the Plan B CRNA podcast. If you haven't already subscribed and reviewed the show, I'd be honored if you took the extra time. It really helps to expand our reach and get the word out about the show. If you're a CRNA who is interested in sharing your story on our podcast, I'd love to have you.
please email me at bobby@oncallinvestments.com for more information. This episode was brought to you by On Call Capital. They are dedicated to helping providers like you develop passive income and generational wealth through investments in the apartment and alternative investment spaces. Feel free to check out their website at www.oncallinvestments.com and subscribe to their free educational email series. You can find On Call Capital on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. You can also check out our YouTube page, where you'll find all of the show episodes along with other educational videos. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you on the next episode.